The jeepneys are arguably the most popular forms of public transportation in the Philippines. They are easily identified on the road with their stainless steel body marked with their multicolored liveries, cheap accessories, and crowded sardines-like seating capacity. The jeepney is an affordable mode of public transportation that ferries individuals within a designated route and stops anywhere in that route to either pick up or drop off a passenger. The jeepney can also seat more than 15 people at a time. In theory, jeepney drivers have to stick to designated stops, but theory and reality don't always agree, and a jeepney therefore will often stop anywhere it's being flagged down or wherever someone would like to disembark. If their jeepneys are not filled to capacity, drivers tend to reduce their speeds to a minimum. After all, there might be someone nearby looking for a ride. Throughout the years, the jeepney has served the Filipino both publicly and privately. However, it has received a lot of negative reception due to its contribution to traffic, pollution, and congestion. Alas, the past decade has seen a slow decline in the jeepney's dominant status as king of the road. To relieve traffic congestion, jeepneys were bullied and selectively banned from some of the main thoroughfares.
The jeepney was introduced after World War II. They got their start as Willys Jeeps were left behind when the Americans departed the Philippines at the end of the World War. The war had left the public transportation networks of the Philippines in shambles, and the U.S. military left behind hundreds of old Willys and Ford Jeeps they no longer had any use for. It was a set of circumstances that matched perfectly. Hundreds of surplus jeeps were sold or given to local Filipinos, where they were then converted for civilian utility.
Eventually, as the form of transportation became more popular and the original jeeps began clunking out, a second wave of jeepneys emerged. These ones were distinctly made in the Philippines. Backyard garages began appearing that manufactured these vehicles by hand. The main parts, engines, transmissions, were mostly imported from Japan, while the chassis and bodies were molded from scratch or retrieved from scrap yards. This multinational, multi-method conglomeration of materials were then mashed together using an array of different designs to create something distinctly Filipino, which in a very direct way represented the culture itself. Today, there are over 60,000 jeepneys on the streets of Manila and untold thousands more around the country.
What does this Jeep left over from World War II have to do with the Philippines? Well, I'm about to tell you. Thanks for the ride. Just kidding. You know we're at HistoryCon and there's nobody driving. But this is Henry. He is the Jeepney master. What's up, brother?
Hi, how are you, man? Good.
Hey, so I see 1955 on the license plate. Is that when the first Jeepney was born?
Yeah, after World War II, the American soldiers left the country, so a lot of jeepneys, or Jeep, the original army truck Jeep.
Right.
Yeah, so Filipinos converted it into passenger type vehicle and then made it longer, and they put roof so that it can accommodate a lot of passengers. So,
Well, the Jeepney has been such a staple of the Philippines.
Yes, yes.
Why is it called Jeepney? Why not just call it Jeep?
yeah, there are a lot of theories on how the term jeepney was coined, but one of the most popular, it came from Jeep, the original army truck, the Jeep, and the knee. Because when you ride this is the original one,
Right.
the knees of the passenger
Are hitting
almost-
each other.
Yeah, so that's why it's called the jeepney.
I love that.
70 years after the Willys Jeep, this is what it looks like in the global scale, specifically made by the American automobile company Jeep. It still retains the slotted grills and round headlights. It has gone through many improvements such as engine upgrades, safety equipment, extra seats, and a proper roof. The new Jeep is also given all-terrain tires which stay true to its original purpose, an all-terrain land vehicle. The public jeepneys in the Philippines, however, have undergone little to no major improvements. The general design remains unchanged, and even the jeepneys still retain the same chassis as the 1940s Ford or Willys Jeep. This is very problematic since it is a reflection to the Filipino innovation. Unlike the Jeeps in the US, which have taken themselves under their own name with a unified design and clear identity, the jeepneys in the Philippines all boast different designs with no unifying identity. The jeepneys also use an old design and fail to integrate with modern technology by using old or recycled materials for its hardware. The jeepney was once called the undisputed king of the road, but no longer. Indeed, once it was the symbol of Filipino creativity, innovativeness, and ingenuity. Today it is a tarnished icon, its survival threatened from many fronts, bullied by government regulations, victimized by rising costs, and the competition of cheaper alternatives. The modernization of our Jeeps in the Philippines are still in the process of being fully implemented within the country. This is in the form of the e-Jeep. The e-Jeepney runs on pure electricity supplied by rechargeable automotive batteries. Thus, it does not consume either gasoline or diesel to operate. It therefore has no noise, no fumes, no harmful emissions. It can be charged overnight for about 8 hours on an ordinary wall outlet, much like charging a cell phone, and runs the next day for a minimum of 65 kilometers. There has been an ongoing debate on whether or not the e-Jeeps should fully replace the Jeeps we have running today. The debate is not only focused on the future of the Jeepney, which as we all know was born after the war when creative Filipinos repaired and reconditioned Willie's Jeep left by American forces. From then it has become a major industry in the country. Jeepney makers not only flourished in Luzon but also in the Visayas and Mindanao. The old reliable Jeepney is patronized by people coming from all market segments. Enterprising capitalists has made it as a source of livelihood to any Juan, Pedro, and Pablo who knows the basics of driving, and the boundary system was born. The unspoken words of the debate is no one from the transport group wants change, and this is aggressively defended by issues like possible increase in passenger fares, displacement of many drivers and operators, and challenges in financing. While symbolizing Filipino culture, however, the jeepney has also become associated with inefficient and unsustainable mass transportation in Metro Manila. Jeepneys are among the biggest sources of carbon emissions. Their drivers are also notoriously resistant to any effort to impose road discipline, picking up and unloading passengers even in the middle of busy thoroughfares and turning stops into virtual terminals. Aside from these, it is still the same jeepneys that have remained and been running on our roads for many years. Engines were just being reconditioned, tires are being replaced by second-hand or recap, while exteriors are just repainted over the years. It is obvious that change must be made in order to improve not only the jeeps in the country, but by improving jeeps. Thus, it too create a butterfly effect on improving the public means of transportation within the country, cleanliness in the environment and ecosystem, a more feasible and efficient means of transportation and traffic as well.
All this, the innovation of jeeps abroad compared to the lack of innovation with the ones here in the Philippines, the slow growth in improving our jeeps in the country despite us people knowing its negative effects on society and its flaws, the constant recycle of used and second-hand materials thinking it will make jeeps better, and our constant resistance to change are part of the exact flawed ideologies and current problematic situations that we Filipinos have and currently endure, as discussed in class. For one, the innovation of jeeps abroad compared to the lack of innovation with the ones here in the Philippines symbolizes how countries continue to develop, grow, and prosper, while we, the Philippines, still remain the same. A third world country where the poor only get poorer and the rich only gets richer, despite the constant quote-unquote growth that we claim to undergo. Unfortunately, it is the working class, commoners, and the less fortunate that feel the negative effects of what it is like to live in a third world country, as the more fortunate ones are always the ones that have advantages and privileges within society and life. Secondly, the constant recycling of used and second-hand materials by jeepney drivers and manufacturers thinking it will make jeeps better mirrors how, one, infrastructure doesn't truly improve in our country, as MRT, LRT as examples which were introduced in the early 80s and 90s constantly break down, and roads around the country are easily eroded, and streets are constantly flooded whenever it rains. 2. This shows how family dynasties in the Philippines that have huge corporations and companies just continue to employ contractual workers who are just constantly replaced year after year. Third, this too shows how Filipinos recycle old practices that we should no longer follow, like the crab mentality and the colonial mentality. Lastly, our constant resistance to change is the clear example of why things always remain the same. Change is not necessarily wrong or negative, but change may be too for the better, and that is what the Philippine needs. In our country, we already know the present flaws in our ideologies, in the society, and especially in the hierarchy, in the political and industrial aspects of the country, yet we do nothing about it. Either the Filipinos resist change or maybe we just do not care at all. What happened to the Filipinos who collectively agreed and marched towards EDSA during the people power to initiate change when it is clear that you are headed to the path of disaster? Yet till now we continue to do nothing about anything. The cycle of our flawed ideologies is ever present even in something as symbolic as the Jeep, and still continues to prevail even till today. Despite this realization, there is no catharsis nor change by the people. We still continue to linger like headless chickens stuck in a fantasy that everything is great, in the continuous cycle that we have put ourselves upon. That is why, till now, we are still just a third world country, and our people are just headed downwards. And so we wonder, do we actually ignore and delay the innovation of jeepneys because of actual concerns with the Jeep? Or is it because that we as Filipinos are just incapable of innovation and change as present within ourselves?